Let's begin with developments in the Middle East, because it has been a wildly volatile 13 days in the region. How do you see NATO leaders viewing President Trump's fragile truce between Israel and Iran?
Well, let's start with the problem, Dan. It was not one that they were involved with. And in fact, they were not involved with any of the coordination, even the communication leading up to that attack. And NATO is an alliance, one which depends on allies talking to each other and working together in self-defense. So I think what Trump is going to hear a lot of this morning is that there needs to be more, both when it comes to Israel, Iran, as well as Russia and Ukraine, more coordination between allies. And this just quite frankly hasn't been Trump's MO. He wants to be more of a cowboy. He wants to go out and shoot from the hip and go it alone. I don't know whether or not, especially after seeing some of the collateral consequences that have come from his engagement in Iran, that this is a smart path. But nonetheless, Trump is well down it, and we'll see where it takes him.
But Brett, just to push back on that, of course, NATO's primary focus is the security and defence positioning of Europe. What role do you think they could have played in helping to solve this challenge in the Middle East?
Well, I think it's less of a NATO role, albeit it's an important coordination mechanism. I think, the allies here, many of whom have presence, whether it's military and security presence, economic presence, or just the presence of their citizens across the Gulf, will want to have had that level of insight, advance warning before some of these strikes take place. Obviously, they have interest in preparation and ensuring the safety of those interests. So all of that is to say it may not necessarily be a NATO response, a NATO mechanism, but the countries here certainly have a whole lot of equities and concerns when it comes to actions in the Gulf.
Brett, I guess one of the positives here is the fact that the president is actually showing up this time. How do you think this administration views the role of NATO and this organization generally? Has it improved since Trump won?
Well, look, there is no doubt, Dan, that Trump is going to take a victory lap here, and deservedly so. The fact that NATO allies have pushed up not just to 2%, but now to 5% of GDP committed towards defense spending is a major victory. One, when back in the Obama days, we were trying to get our NATO allies to 2% seemed unreasonable, to even unthinkable. So Trump is rightly going to parade this around as progress. That being said, he has not been a consistent actor on the world stage. I think, we will see some of the self-congratulations. But the question right now, and you heard it on Air Force One as he was flying over here, is whether or not Trump is committed to Article 5. And he continues to waffle on this question. He said it depends on what the definition is. Well, deterrents are not good if it depends.
And that's a fair point. So where does the administration stand on this issue, particularly as we see the crisis facing Ukraine continuing to engulf these leaders, military solutions on one side and seemingly no diplomatic path on the other?
Well, there's a really interesting contrast between the level of engagement, the emphasis on progress and peace that Trump has put on the Middle East, and then what is happening in Ukraine. I think, you are going to struggle if you're the Americans to justify how, on the one hand, Iran was not able to have access to certain weapons. The response to their actions, obviously, with Israel and with some of their proxies in the Middle East, and then the lack of action, the lack of interest even in Ukraine. So right now, Trump is going to face a NATO summit which wants to know where are we going on Ukraine, and he has not had a good answer yet. He's had, the suggestion that at times he might come down hard on Putin, but then he's backed off of that. I think, leaders here in The Hague are going to want to hear a plan, a path forward. And, Trump likes this kind of personal diplomacy and seems to often operate on impulse. That is not something that NATO does well, and hopefully out of this summit we can get more of a commitment with Zelensky here to what the path forward is for Ukraine.
Indeed, and I think you characterize this really well. You've put this all into context because, as you say, in the lead up to this NATO summit, we also saw this apparently leaked text message from the NATO Secretary General praising President Trump ahead of his arrival, even posting this message calling this summit, quote, another big success. Obviously, the president coming in with the tailwind of this fragile ceasefire, you could call it, in the Middle East. Brett, you also mentioned what's happening with defence spending, and I wanted to pick up on that as well because it's said that NATO leaders are going to be backing this 5% number. Do you think that is genuine consensus or just stagecraft to keep Trump from ultimately blowing up this alliance?
Well, I think it depends on each country. And look, Dan, 5% can mean different things in different places. And, just at a dinner last night with one of the defense contractors here, was raised this question of, okay, we now have 5%, but how does that actually get implemented? And obviously you have countries like Spain that are still holdouts saying, well, we may not get to 5%. If they are smart, and to the point that your question raises, I think putting the goal of 5% on the table is an important one. It diffuses some of the tension with Trump. But ultimately, whether we get there in the next couple of years, how we get there, what gets included in that are all really, really critical questions. And I would say, especially for CNBC's audience, industry has a big role to play here. You had the defense industry forum here and helping government leaders to shape smartly where this spending goes, and that it isn't, quite frankly, just wasted money. It isn't spent in the wrong places. That is the task that looms ahead of us, and one that I think a lot of folks on the margins of this summit are going to be focused on.